Hi, morning team, and morning to our viewers and our listeners. A new term in 102.1 viewers, viewing radio now, but a pleasant good
Yeah,
morning to Trinidad and Tobago.
yeah. We told Richard that when the people thought they could get a job in radio to put a camera. That was it. That was it. Anyway, morning to you, Gavin Heerah. How art thou?
Morning, I'm doing fine, guys, and continue to tread lightly, but stay in the race.
I hear. I
A
hear.
lot to discuss. What were your first responses when you heard the Prime Minister's statements in the Parliament last Wednesday? What were your first thoughts?
Yeah. Actually, before we go into the conversation, just want to say two things. One, we continue to send out our prayers and our support to our Caribbean nations and to the survivors and victims of peril and the mobilization from various organizations. So we are reaching out, and we just want to say, we understand the issues that they're facing. And two,
Yeah.
Dr. Richards, I'd like to congratulate you, compliment you on the vice chair job with that JSC on the reduction of violent crime. That was an excellent coordinating approach. So great job on that.
Well, that's the Parliament Secretariat. It's not my work.
Actually, Beryl killed 6 people in the U.S. yesterday.
Yeah, it's
Heading
really
a tropical wave,
intensifying.
and system is heading to Toronto. Would you believe?
Yeah. So
Right.
back to your question. Of course, it raised extreme concerns, especially for an institution as what I'll call as sensitive and as important as an integral to our informed decision making in national security. So it really raised concerns from my part, having actually walked the corridors and understood the importance that this institution plays nationally and regionally, more importantly internationally for Trinidad and Tobago.
Are you surprised, seemingly? Well, first of all, do you think there was enough oversight of the agency given what the Prime Minister divulged happened? Clearly, there was a ramp up of the purchase of arms and ammunition that seemingly went unnoticed for between 2019, and 2021 and 2022, doubling in the last year from what it was the previous year. And also in the Prime Minister's was the purchase of over 100 types of sophisticated weapons, in some instances with silencers, seemingly also without the knowledge and authorization from the National Security Council, and with clearly unknown to them.
Yeah, well, there's an approach that we're going to have to take this morning. And one of them is that, well, the Prime Minister would have spoken into the Hansard. And I know the former director of the SSA also made some statements. And I think I brushed past that into one of our dailies. And I know then after that, it invited a lot of comments and contribution and opinions in the political gael, and a number of Guamen joined in. But I in the Navy, there's an international signal flag that is called the Alpha flag. And that Alpha says, I have a diver down, stay well clear of me. So I'm going to maneuver in a way of protection and integrity concerning some of these issues. But to the key part of your question, Dr. Richards, it is talking about enough oversight. And sometimes when you have these high-level intelligence agencies, we fall into a sort of complacency as decision makers, as governance in country, to allow them to do what they have to do with the ever so often approaches of all the business continuity plans and whatever. And I'm thinking, and I said it in another place that actually produced my statement on it, that it is a good opportunity now, when we have looked at all of these things, especially with the procurement of the weapons and all of that, to have more oversight over the SSA as we rebuild now, as we restructure, as we look to pick up the pieces, but to ensure that certain actions of the national intelligence agencies are also under that concept of accountability, and we have to raise the volume on accountability, raise the volume on that oversight. Because if we don't, then we'll have agencies doing certain things, and it's left, and the key decision makers are left.
Gavin, does the SSA head attend meetings of the National Security Council regularly or semi-regularly?
Correct.
Who does he or she report to?
The National Security Council and the Minister of National Security, and I guess that's how it's supposed to be.
Is it normal for the head of the SSA to inform the National Security Council and or the Minister of National Security that we're purchasing ammunition, more ammunition, the types of weapons, etc., in a report or in those meetings?
Probably not in the meetings, but there has to be some sort of dialogue, not necessarily directly to the Minister of National Security, but there should be channels of accountability so that there's some sort of understanding. Many of these agencies have their own purse, and they're free to do their procurement, they're free to do their acquisitions, but it must be justified at the end of the day, and there must be some sort of status to understand what is the operational status, what is the asset status and serviceability, and therefore the only way to know this is through oversight or through what is known as a prescribed sort of reporting source. And although it's a high-level intelligence agency, although it's painted with security classification, secret, strictly confidential, along those lines, there are key reporting points at the Ministry of National Security that must keep tab of the spending, and of course what we have and what we don't have, and why we are procuring these things. So there is a process inside of there. So I don't know if it went unnoticed. I don't know if it's been reported that it was unnoticed, or somewhere along the line somebody knew. But
you know what I'm a little confused about? I mean, there are several things that are a little confusing to me. One, you talked about international agencies and international, I assume, security agencies and how they function in the Trinidad and Tobago space, if I'm reading you correctly. You talked in conjunction with the SSA. But I assume the interfacing of those international security agencies with the Trinidad and Tobago space would be the subject to government agreements with some sort of memorandum of understanding between the whatever governments and our governments in terms of the reach of those agencies and what specifically they are in the space for. I'm not talking about covert. I don't know that we have a space that needs covert monitoring by other agencies, international agencies, as they may in an international bigger country space. So I'm assuming that would be ordered, or it would be an orderly interfacing, where they provide certain intelligence and certain assets to assist in whatever challenges that we are facing, as distinct from a homegrown agency like the SSA, where you're going to have some measure of oversight, whatever that oversight is. But a lot of that oversight, to me, some of it has to be legislative, in terms of the functioning of the institution and who is your reporting relationship with. Because you have to have a reporting relationship. Every institution has a hierarchical org chart. So you must know to whom you are reporting and what is the substance of what you're supposed to report. So I am assuming there is some level of oversight ingrained in whatever the org structure is. What we're talking about is if the agency goes awry, which is what the Prime Minister is suggesting from the audit report from Brigadier
Spencer.
Philip Spencer, is what we're looking at, and how was that missed?
Yeah, correct.
So what kind of oversight do you need for those sorts of issues in making sure that an agency doesn't become rogue, inverted commas, or allegedly rogue, and so what kind of oversight is that, and at what level? Because it meets like a balancing line. It's like you want the agency to be functional, so you don't want it to be bureaucratically in some sort of straitjacket with everything that it does, but you still want some measure of responsible oversight on the activities of this, whatever that institution is. What is that balancing act there, and what kind of oversight specifically are you talking about, Gavin, that would look at those particular rogue, possible, going outside of your ambit and becoming rogue inverted commas.
No, I hear you. You see, yeah, we must not weaponize the term oversight, and you've seen that happen in a number of other platforms. But it's important to maintain what we call the integrity of the intelligence architecture by having that oversight, that accountability. Now, we have to also understand that there's a certain amount of autonomy with an intelligence agency to do certain things and to keep, of course, the executive through our governmental structure informed of what is taking place at the various levels, be it the National Security Council, meetings of the heads of security, or briefings to the minister et al. But they're just two basic ones really at this point, Rich, and those are the legislative oversight to ensure that we are maintaining and we are walking according to the guardrails, and of course operational oversight, so as to ensure that equipment, certification, personnel along those lines, we are kept abreast of what is taking place and how it is being used. Also, the relationships that we are engaging with internationally, with our international counterparts, for the geopolitical analysis being a global tension. So that is one aspect of it, plus intelligence sharing, that we may be able to contribute to a case on the shorelines of Switzerland or out there in the Pacific or somewhere in another country, but we have gathered pieces of the puzzle that we can share, and we have that sort of exchange. But of course, there has to be that sort of operational oversight and legislative oversight, so that the agency understands within the lanes that it is operating. You're not supposed to allow that free will to just, that free reign, I should say, to operate as you should, and because you must keep the thing in a certain type of structure. You have to stay in lane when it comes to.
But when you talk about legislative and operational oversight, even if, for example, let's use the Commissioner of Police, who has financial autonomy over the police service, and the Parliament through the budget approves the funding, the Minister of Finance releases the funding. Every state agency, to my knowledge, the process is that even though you have financial independence and you can spend the money, you have to report to the PS of the Ministry of National Security what you're spending money on.
Correct.
You can't buy Tulum and say, well, I use the money for guns.
You're quite correct.
So this is happening year on year. Where was that? Where were those reports about where we got 15 million from the government for fiscal 2020, 2021? And by 2021, 2022, we reported this is what we used it for. We bought equipment, we bought toilet paper, we bought guns, we bought ammunition, and these are the listed items that we bought. All state entities have to do that.
Yeah, and you're quite correct. And we would have had the conversation and many other systems before, Pablo, concerning project governance. We've been talking about it. We're echoing the sentiments of adopting the project governance approach. And what you're saying is correct, but the flow is a bit different in that it's not that you get 50 million and you see what we purchase. You have to present what is your project plan. You have to present what is your vision and forecasting and items of acquisition, what you need to get, what are some of the projects, what are some of the equipment. It assumes a total of, let's say, 15 million. Let's continue to use your full, and then you are granted that purse, maybe in phases, and you are also held accountable to achieve your objectives to which you identified that you needed this equipment for.
So then who wasn't guarding the guard? Because you're right, you have to actually apply to the PS with a project plan for the fiscal about what your requirements are for this year. Correct. Is it ammunition, guns, and then the PS sends it to the ministry technocrats look at it and they approve it, and then after that you have to account to see you actually used it for that. So where did this thing fall apart?
That is the burning question. Did it fall apart? Where did it fall apart? Or did somewhere along the lines, be it in the lines of the ministry, on the lines of the SSA, somebody didn't do their job or haven't been able, and we're picking up the pieces now. So that is why it is so important. What is taking place now with the SSA is not entirely a negative thing. Yes, there may be some scars. It may be surface.
It's very negative. It is a very negative thing. Yeah.
No, listen. You use that opportunity to understand purging. when it comes to intelligence agency house cleaning, and you utilize this situation, this flag that went up, to recognize, wait a minute, there are some flaws in our system. Let's fix this, because we have to rebuild and restore the integrity of that agency. And to do that, you have to move from the lessons learned, the errors made, but people must be held accountable. There's a term in the intelligence industry called remnants. If you're house cleaning and purging, you must be sure to be meticulous and not leave any remnants. When you leave remnants, it chips away at your foundations. So it's very, very important. All what you have said, quite correct. What I have contributed in complementing what has been said, quite correct. But are we expected now to see that house cleaning? And then who's going to do it? How is it going to be implemented? And how is the reporting aspect of what has been done be revealed according to stats data, and now a whole new production line of the new face of the SSA? Those are some of the key things that are facing us as we speak.
Should it be that, because I always try to factor in that we are a small space, because I always think that's part of our problem, that infuses a lot of these issues that we have. It's because we are a small space and you have different personalities. So there are two questions there. One, on news last night, they interviewed people on the street, and by far the majority of people did not believe that this was an issue of any possible overthrow of the government. The vast majority of the people that they interviewed felt it was a ploy for elections in 2025. They were very, I'm stating it broadly, but along that line, they felt very cynical about it. There were one or two maybe that were questioning the issue, like are we discussing it, but the vast majority of them were pretty dismissive about the issue. And how serious it was or not serious. And they felt it was an election coming up in 2025. Brace yourself for anything along that lines. That's the man in the street in one of the news programs.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, do you believe that there was a plot in terms of the SSA to overthrow the government? That's one of my questions. My second question is, should we look, even though we have an agency that is having some level of oversight in terms of a very specialized agency in terms of monitoring and a very elite division, should we maybe, I'm just asking a question, move away from a Trinidad and Tobago centric agency and maybe move to a Caribbean centric agency at that level, where the oversight is even more robust from a regional level?
Yeah.
Those are my two questions.
Yeah, and they're great questions. The first one is sensitive, but we have to go with what we were told. We are just being informed with what we are being told. I am not sure what are the details of the report that would have prompted the statement of the Prime Minister to say what he said. Based on what we are hearing as to overthrowing a government, we have to understand that if something has taken place within one of the agencies that can affect the stability of the government or reveal certain information that is considered secret and sensitive, then in fact the stability, the what we'll call the integrity and the continuity of such of our governance can be affected. I don't know if it's along those lines, or if it was basically a revolution kind of overthrow, coup. I can't say that. So I would prefer to not answer that in detail, because I'm not exposed to the information that has been revealed. But what we have to understand is that the SSA played an integral role in holding the stability of information and informed decision making. And if that is compromised and affected, then the stability of a government can be affected. And that is why, that's how I see it. With regard to a local and a regional, I've advocated, for instance, for us to start looking at the CBI, which is the Caribbean Bureau of Investigations, and involving what we'll call a significant aspect of intelligence gathering. But we still do need that national intelligence agency sort of operations within our country. The SSA although it's localized as for our geographic positioning, is an international agency, deals with regional and international intelligence, and is respected on many tables internationally. We've conducted joint operations, joint intelligence, dealt with a number of stuff regionally and internationally that won't be promulgated in the public domain. But it's a respected agency based on the work done in the past. Hence the reason that brand and that image sort of is still there, and there's an opportunity to build from that cornerstone. And I continue to applaud the hardworking, honest men and women of the SSA, former and present, because there are some good souls in there, to be quite truthful, men and women capable of holding the integrity of that unit.
So their reputation would have taken some banging because of what's playing out in the local space.
Yes.
And so I don't know what your thinking is. How much do you think international intelligence agencies had a part to play? How much do you think they had a part to play in whatever revelations coming out of the SSA, or do you think that was a totally domestic space revelation?
No, the audit was conducted by former Brigadier General Philip Spencer. We have to understand.
No, I'm not talking about the audit. I'm talking about the realization that something was amiss.
Yeah, well, if there are relations and stakeholder relations as such, and information is being received and gathered, as I said, I think there would have been some contributions, basically some questions and answers, some interviews, but I can't say to what level of contributions they would have had regarding this revelation. I don't think it's also strictly local either. I think it was an overarching overview or oversight of the unit, of the agency, so there would have been some international contributions to this, but I'm unable to say because I'm not too sure what were the buttons that were pressed. But if something like that is being done in order to receive the information and provide a report that was so far submitted, it was expected that it would have been done both locally, regionally, and internationally, so as to come up with what was known as a comprehensive viewpoint and that sort of 360-degree look. I'm hoping that is what would have been done.
How does the SSA recover from this?
I think recovery is important, and we have to look at phase development now going forward, picking up the pieces. One of the key things, as I said in the opening statements, guys, is that the need to know from the law-abiding, need to know citizens that the functionality of the SSA is still there. There's still an ability to produce actionable intelligence. But I think at this point, I would strongly advocate that the government looks at pooling together some subject matter experts and a tasking and coordination approach, and offer now the tasking of rebuilding that SSA from the ground up, and ensuring that it maintains its integrity operationally along the lines of legislative, and more importantly with that sort of key aims and objectives that we intend to achieve going forward, because it's a good opportunity now to recognize that the tide has shifted a little bit. The environment has changed incrementally. We now have to change incrementally in how we operate as a national intelligence agency. So I think phase development and a strong subject matter expert team, tasking and coordination, giving certain tasks, coordinating those tasks, achievement over a period, and rebuild the SSA in phases, maintaining its operationality first and foremost, so that we fix the plane while it's flying.
But can it ever get back to that level of trust that is required, though? Because this is pretty serious in terms of the civilian government saying a quasi-military institution had certain malintent against the civilian governance structure. I'm putting it in, grandiose terms in a sense, but that's what it was. So how do you rebuild the trust between these two institutions? Of course, the governing institution is by far more powerful in a sense because the powers are more expansive in terms of what it's dealing with. But how does it work alongside an agency where it now has reason to mistrust?
Yeah.
How do you rebuild that trust
And one of
that side of it looking at you out of the corner of the eye? I wonder what they up to, boy.
You're correct. One of the key aspects in that whole rebuilding of that wall, one of the bricks that go into that foundation is trust. Trust is a key part of an intelligence agency. Yes, and in the early stages, in the pre-embryonic stages, you are going to see people watching you. Not sure if they want to share. Are we sure this thing is sanitized? Are we sure this thing has been cleansed? Was the purging properly done? I am not too comfortable. You are going to get that, and the best way to treat with rebuilding that trust is performance. Let me say that again. The best way to rebuild that trust is with performance. And in such a way, that's why I am advocating, I'm holding on the operationality, the functionality, that operations aspect of the SSA, the actionable intelligence has to come to the floor. That is what has to be prioritized so that the trust aspect of all of the stakeholders regionally and internationally can be maintained because of the performance, because of the type of intelligence that is still coming out of those corridors. And that has to be done with subject matter experts understanding how to use the tools. Because at the end of the day, the SSA is an integral tool. It is not a replacement for other agencies. It's a tool that can be used to ensure that the safety, security, and the integrity of our critical infrastructure remain secured.
Gavin, how concerned are you that the agencies whose task it was to gather intelligence at the highest level, analyze this intelligence, and then pass this intelligence on to the National Security Council, the Commissioner of Police, and in some instances, regional and international counterparts, in the interest of the fight against crime and criminality, in the Prime Minister's words, was so compromised that there seemed to be an attempt to remove or usurp the authority of illegitimately elected government by what he described as a religious XYZ. And it seemed to have been happening over a period of time, which also implies that there may have also been, at some level, a compromise of the intelligence and or analyses sent to the National Security Council. Because if we are to believe that it was trying to undermine the government, part of doing that could be sending erroneous information. You understand? To mislead the government for whatever reason, if we are to believe they intended to undermine the government's efforts, and also regional and international counterparts. So, and part of, I know, the check and balance is that international agencies corroborate what they know with the local and regional agencies' intelligence. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And when there's commonality, there's a higher chance that this information and data is correct. So if you're saying you had 12 gangs in Trinidad, and the regional people saying that, and the international people saying that, we know that more than likely there are 12 gangs in Trinidad. If you're saying there are 12, regional saying there are 4, and international saying there are 16, we have some discrepancies that we have to resolve. How concerned are you that a lot of that information, given what the Prime Minister said, may have been compromised and impacted negatively the fight against crime in the country?
Yeah, and that is where the metal hits the road, because at the end of the day, we are depending on the product that is coming out of the SSA. And if for some reason there's a feeling, an understanding, a perception, there's data, statistics that shows that there was compromise, then every single touch of the brush will be looked at as though it was compromised. And that is why, as I continue to say, the integrity and the performance now is going to be very, very important, because there must be concerns that then what have you been telling? Then what you've been telling me is this? Can I trust this within the last 6 months to a year, or was there some sort of doctoring, or And I'm hoping that there wasn't. I don't think that there.
So then why should international agencies now, given that we clearly, in some way, form or fashion, drop the ball in monitoring and managing our own agency, believe that we have put systems in place to ensure that the information coming out of Trinidad Tobago to our counterparts in North America and Europe, UK, etc., is credible, given what we have admitted ourselves?
Right, exactly. And you see that when you make a statement, Pablo, but when a statement is made like that, it hits the global system, and everybody, stands up and the eyes are open of what the hell, because it will now affect our relationships. It will now affect what we were depending upon in order to fit those puzzles outside there. And as I said, and I told you before, SSA was not only it might have been positioned geographically, locally, but it was considered an international counterpart. We contributed internationally when it came to intelligence and geopolitical analysis, and therefore everyone has to be concerned of what took place. That is why we have to ensure now that we provide a sort of house cleaning going forward so that we can reestablish the integrity of the unit, of the agency. It's very important. Even the media, is very concerned. Security, safety, the country, the business fraternity, investments and all of that depends on the type of intelligence that comes out of your country. And we're continuing to see things like the US advisories, the UK advisories. You're wondering now how stable is the security of this country.
Do you think those advisories or the reissuance of those advisories are related? They came 1 and 2 days after the Prime Minister's statements in the Parliament.
Quite related.
Do you think they're related?
Yes, they are.
I'll tell you why I asked the first question. The SSA came before the JSC National Security about 3-4 years ago, and they presented out of the public view because the information was national security sensitive. So very often they would not broadcast those things. One particular scenario regarding gangs in the country, and the police had a different scenario. And we were very confused as to which one was accurate. Now, in retrospect, hearing all this, you understand?
And you were just as you said, a governmental fraternity there doing what you had to do. But when you have disparity, when you have that sort of differentiation in information and intelligence, one wonders then who is actually telling the truth. And everybody's supporting with data, Pablo, if you realize, in both of them, everybody provided their own data to justify what they were saying. And this is why we need to have a standardization. There's supposed to be a tapestry that is linked together when it comes to our intelligence, so that there's a sort of understanding and a standardization of the intelligence from the SSA is supporting the TTPS, vice versa, the TTDF. We have a nice sort of chemistry concerning that intelligence in country. And before in country, we had something called the JIG and the JOG, the Joint Intelligence Group and the Joint Operations Group, that provided the collaboration. So there was a collaborative approach for intelligence gathering, and everybody shared and spoke and talked on the table. In the Joint Operations Group, there was a similarity where there was a joint theatering of the intelligence in order to execute operations and maximize the assets of the state. And we need to come back into that sort of approach, that sort of national intelligence culture in executing what is known as the quick wins and the understanding and the operations of the JIG and the JOG in the country, to make sure that there's a standardization of the intelligence and a similarity reflected across all platforms.
Would you be ready to take some calls?
Sure.
So we break up our lines at this point.
I have 10 more minutes for you guys, though. I only have 10 more minutes.
Okay. That's all right.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. All right.
So let's break up our lines at this point.
8255 North Americans, 866-525-1099. All right.
I just think it's interesting to me that all this could happen under the nose of the National Security Council, and there were no mechanisms to red flag spending, red flag personnel hiring, red flag subversive efforts at the level which is guiding a lot of the decisions of the National Security Council.
I would when I interviewed Gary Griffith last week, I raised the issue of the church members, and he didn't think that a group. I'm paraphrasing, but when I asked him, was that a red flag for him in terms of the number of people who belong to one religious organization? He said it wasn't a red flag for him. Was it a red flag for you?
I think if if there was a large percentage of recruitment, I don't know, I can't say, but if there was a large percentage of recruitment coming from one specific religious institution, then of course it's a red flag. Then why is everybody coming from this specific institution? If it's Christian employees along the lines, people who indicate that their religious persuasion are Christians, then that's fine. But if you have a tunnel sort of approach, and we have 10 people coming from one specific institution to the SSA, then of course it's a red flag. It has to be noticed like that. But I don't have that data to say. I'm just going with what is said. But we in institutions and agencies in the country, people coming from all walks of life, all levels, all various sort of beliefs and systems. That's a major part of the thing, to the diversification of how we build and structure our agencies. But if we
should we be looking at all the other security agencies and doing a deep dive to see if there are anomalies also?
I strongly agree that we should. I advocate that we should. This is an indicator. That's why I tell you, it's not. It sounds negative. It is, in fact, a sort of negative brush. But it's also an indicator. A switch is going on. This is an opportunity for us to fix and do some house cleaning across the floor. So that's how I see it, and I see it as an opportunity, for purging. It's a portal that has been exposed for purging, and we should now. This can't be just an SSA issue. Let's look at all of the other agencies. Let's begin that sort of approach and ensure that we can sanitize and rebuild the thing in a way that we will continue to be the envy of the region when it comes to our.
What's happening in Tobago? What do you think is happening in Tobago?
Okay, hold that thought for 1 second. I've had a call on for you long this while now. Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. Nice discussion. What is most startling for me is that I think the Minister of National Security will have said they were having bi-monthly or monthly meetings with the SSA. So it means then they were being misled all the time, not being kept abreast and accountable as to what was being done within the SSA, and they were had a reign on their own to do whatever they wanted to do. It's very shocking to me. Thank you.
Thank you. One more call and then we'll answer Paul's question. Good morning.
Good morning.
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 Great show as always. Great show as always.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Heerah, you spoke about some institutions or intelligence agencies should be given a level of autonomy. But even with a level of autonomy, there has to be some sort of accountability, right? That's one. And secondly, my main issue really is all intelligence agencies should have some terms of reference by which they operate. I would like to know if the importation of guns and the building of ammunition, was that part of their terms of reference? Thank you.
Yeah. So, the two callers made some very good questions, great contributions. And in fact, if we were having bi-monthly meetings or whatever, then what was actually being spoken in those bi-monthly meetings? What were some of the issues of reporting and keeping abreast as to the developments and what was taking place at the SSA? So he was quite correct, that first caller. The second caller is on target. To be quite truthful, he's on target, because if you're giving autonomy, there must be accountability, and within that accountability, that is not an excuse for free reign to do as you will. So there has to be some sort of oversight and keeping your hand on the pulse as to what is taking place. And the terms of reference that you mentioned is something what we were saying, Pablo, with regard to what is the part of your forecasting? What do you intend to do and achieve over the next 6 months to a year? How much is that going to cost? And when you are actually given those purchases or acquisitions, we have to be able to do those 3 M's: measure, manage, and monitor, to ensure that it is being effectively utilized. So I think the callers are on target with those questions. As for Tobago has gone in a totally next direction, and who would have expected triple murders, and drive-by shootings to the extent. I don't think it's the migration of Trinidadian gangs going up there. I think it's that whole aspect of that control factor of organized crime touching the ground now in Tobago and sprouting up now gang warfare to a level that we never really saw. And with that needs a sort of action that brings that to a stop, because we can't leave that thing to breathe. We can't give it oxygen. That needs to be brought to a stop, and it needs a certain amount of courage in our decision making and our operations. Because if that is left to grow any further, it can put Tobago is our jewel, you know. That's our investment. That's where people. That's a destination, and you don't want to push back on visitors. Tourism is one of the main bread baskets of our beloved Tobago. So I'm very concerned of what I'm seeing taking place in Tobago presently.
Paul, you're muted.
You're muted, Paul.
Thanks, Echo.
So you don't think it's Trinidad gangs? Many are suggesting, "Oh, it's Trinidad gangs going over there and creating mayhem." You don't think so? You think this is homebred Tobago criminality? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying that, and I'm saying that the establishment of gangs in country and the whole gang culture thing is a franchise. And don't get too misled by that. They are representations, but it's not Trinidadians that have migrated. It's a representation of what is taking place in country. They're now in possession of high-powered weapons, so we have to pay attention. I said it before in another forum in a conversation. We have to pay
So what do they take in Tobago? In Trinidad, it takes drug turf in general, so-called businesses and money. What is driving it in Tobago, in your opinion? Same thing?
Same thing. Transnational organized crime has its tentacles all over. And I wanted to get back to the point that I'm talking about. There has to be a proper border control management aspect for Little Tobago. We can't isolate the border control management, the breaches in the border control in Tobago. We had a vessel overturning there and an oil spill. We have vessels, penetrating the territorial waters of Tobago. We have the gun trade, the narco trade that has been continuing over there a number of years. But it's a close-knit, everybody know everybody, Tobago. So therefore, it's very, very important to understand how we operationalize to stop. I think the heads of security are actually meeting there. If not, I think it's tomorrow. And the CSSB, the chief secretary, has been invited. I'm hoping that there are good discussions there to move in a direction of tactical approaches to bring this thing to a close.
The meeting today. Gavin, closing comments, please. Closing comments, please. Your closing comments.
Yeah, my closing comments is that I think the government really needs to put together a good team, a subject matter team that will focus on the rebuilding and the restructuring and the restoring of the integrity of the SSA, starting from the ground up, and give them a tasking and coordination phase development so that we could ensure that the product that continues to come out of the SSA will continue to be one of high level and respected and trusted. And I think that rebuilding is something that needs to be also exercised across all platforms of our key intelligence agencies in country. Used the indicator of what took place in the SSA as an opportunity now to look at some of the other agencies so that we can ensure that the safety, security, and more importantly, the comfort of our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago is dependable on the agencies that are so positioned to provide that information. Stay safe, Trinidad and Tobago.